The 15 Best Urban Legend Horror Movies 2020. This weekend, Slender Man opens in theaters after an extended and winding road to the box office, including multiple release date changes and a mostly absent marketing campaign. The central story is based on the internet lore surrounding the titular character, a long, spindly human-like figure who stalks, abducts, and traumatizes people, particularly kids. In the movie, a group of teen girls attempt to solve the mystery of Slender Man to protect themselves and save a friend who goes missing. It's classic urban legend horror, those scary stories you heard through your best friend's cousin's girlfriend who knows a guy that was totally killed by mixing pop rocks with soda. If you're looking for more spooky stories along these lines, we've come up with a list of 15 urban legend horror movies ready to freak you the hell out, ranked in ascending order of quality. From the haunted VHS tapes of Japan to the sewer-trawling alligators of the United States, here's your guide to the best, most bombastic, and occasionally sexy urban myth-based horror movies. 15. The Curve, 1998. When this one was released at the Sundance Film Festival in 1998, it was called Dead Man's Curve, but the name was changed so it didn't sound exactly like another movie coming out that year revolving around the exact same premise: conspire to kill your roommate, because if they die, the university will grant you straight A's due to hardship. Curve was the edgier version, and starred Michael Vartan, Matthew Lillard, and Kerry Russell, with all of her long curly hair. It's an incredible 90s time capsule in which one character tries to assuage another's fears about her fizzling relationship by saying, "You guys are like Kurt Cobain and Courtney Love. You guys are meant to be together." 14. The Tag-Along, 2015. This Taiwanese blockbuster is based on the legend of the little girl in red who follows those visiting the forest and snatches their souls away. In this case, she hunts a young professional man and his family, who have recently crossed paths with her in the woods, and slowly starts pulling them over into the spirit realm. The graphics are pretty poor, but there are still a number of good jump scares, and the movie's apparent anti-abortion, anti-career message for women functions as a very interesting lens to consider Taiwanese myth and cultural norms. Learning through horror. 13. Alligator, 1980. There definitely aren't enough sewer monsters on this list, so for your consideration we offer Alligator, a movie about 36-foot-long urban-dwelling reptile that eats people and has the strength to burst straight up through a concrete sidewalk. Get unlimited access to Vulture and everything else New York. Learn more. 12. Urban Legend, 1998. Did you say you wanted your horror delivered with a side of hot 90s stars? Of course you do. Urban Legend stars Tara Reid, Alicia Witt, Rebecca Gayheart, Jared Leto, and Joshua Jackson, in addition to genre icons Robert Englund and Brad Dourif, as college students pursued by a murderer who likes to use urban myths as deadly setups. There are pop rocks and soda, the killer in the backseat, Bloody Mary, organ harvesting, ankle slashing, the babysitter and the man upstairs, and even more. It's a Legends clearinghouse. 11. Trick or Treat, 2007. This holiday-specific movie takes place over the course of a Halloween night and tells a series of interconnecting stories about people who must suffer the consequences of breaking the evening's traditions. There are spooky trick-or-treaters, jack-o'-lanterns aplenty, a Halloween school bus massacre, and more. 10. Christine, 1983. Stephen King is responsible for at least 74% of our pop culture, and this 1983 adaptation is one of the better screen renditions of his work. When dorky Arnie Cunningham, Keith Gordon, meets the car of his dreams in a junkyard, he spends his hard-earned college money to make it his own. Christine is the car's name, and once it's all spruced up, it gives Arnie a confidence he's never known, along with a real mean streak. Arnie loves his new ride, and in turn, the car will protect him from even the slightest offense or threat to their very close relationship. Autonomous vengeful cars are one of the more surprisingly enduring haunted tales, and Christine is really its standard bearer. 9. The Hitcher, 1986. Rutger Hauer is terrifying. Full stop. It's his cold, relentlessness cruelty in The Hitcher that makes it a classic. As John Ryder, Hauer is the man together with his thumb out on the highway that your mom warned you about. After an early encounter with young Jim, Ryder spends the remainder of the movie ruining Jim's life and framing him for his cross-Texas killing spree. Hitcher also features a perfectly disaffected young Jennifer Jason Leigh. 8. Death Dream, 1974. Also called Dead of Night, this combat the W. Jacobs story, The Monkey's Paw, is a few soldier who dies in battle but is willed back to life by the pleas of his mother. But the soldier, Andy, isn't an equivalent when he returns, and is even aware that he's now the living dead. He requires blood to stay from decaying, and as his ghoulish behavior persists, his family crumbles around him. Death Dream is Canadian cult classic and also a pointy critique of the consequences of combat on returning soldiers. Urban legend movies aren't all just fluff. 7. I Do Know What You Probably Did Last Summer, 1997. The legend of the hook-handed man has been around for an extended time, but it's never been presented with the maximum amount sheen because it has in I Do Know What You Probably Did Last Summer. The 1990s really perfected the sexy teens in horror, construction, see, The School, Teaching Mrs. Tingle, Scream, etc., and therein regard, this ensemble, featuring Sarah Michelle Gellar, Jennifer Love Hewitt, Ryan Phillippe, and Freddie Prinze Jr., really obliterated the competition. After an evening of drinking and rabble-rousing, a gaggle of friends on the cusp of high school graduation accidentally kill a person during a drunken joyride. It just about ruins all of their lives, but being stuck in your small-town bait shop may be a light sentence compared to the vengeance which will be exacted on the teenagers for his or her crime and their dirty cover-up. If you haven't seen this one then, well, what are you waiting for? 6. Ju-on, The Grudge, 2002. Together with Ringu, Ju-on may be a standard bearer for the Japanese ghost horror wave within the 1990s and early 2000s. It tells a series of interconnected stories that each one focus on a house where a terrible tragedy occurred, and where the spirits of the traumatized victims are left to haunt anyone who comes in after them. Ju-on would are terrifying if it had just had Kayako, the long-haired ghost like Ring's Samara, Ringu's Sadako, but it also served as Toshio, one among the foremost terrifying children within the history of terrifying horror movie children. But plow ahead and skip the 2004 American remake. 5. Black Christmas, 1974. Prepare for some possible heresy. Albeit when a stranger calls defined the convention of the killer is already within the house, Black Christmas is that the superior execution of the premise. The primary half-hour of stranger calls is a few of the simplest pure fear ever placed on screen, but there's an entire hour then that isn't nearly as good. Black Christmas, however, may be a sorority slasher treat from starting to end. During this Canadian classic, several of the sisters from Pi Kappa Delta are being harassed by a person dubbed the Moaner, who calls and just makes suggestive noises on the opposite end of the road. It's nothing quite an annoyance until sisters start going missing, and therefore the movie's low budget makes it all feel very real. Tuned to ascertain Margot Kidder and Andrea Martin in their cinematic infancies. 4. Willow Creek, 2013. There are two very surprising things to think about Willow Creek right off the top. It's a really scary and not in the least cheesy combat, The Parable of Bigfoot, and it had been written and directed by Bobcat Goldthwait. Yes, he has carved out a solid directing career for himself, totally on television, but to most of the people he's probably still that neurotic screaming comedian from the 1990s. Willow Creek follows a few camping within the woods and playing tourist around Sasquatch's alleged stomping grounds, but who find yourself finding way far more than they bargained for. The movie is a perfect case for using found footage, and there's one long, static shot during a dewy tent that's so tense it'll shave a minimum of a year off your life. 3. The Ring, 2002. Of all the attempts to successfully import J-horror to the US within the aughts, this adaptation of Ringu is the just one that worked, and boy did it really work. Naomi Watts delivers an era-defining horror heroine performance as a mom trying to save lots of her son from the wicked Samara, a ghost that gets passed around sort of a disease after you've watched a haunting VHS tape she possessed. Play the video and you've got 7 days until some time expires. It features a teenage Amber Tamblyn within the cold open, and tiny David Dorfman, playing the son of Watts, is creepy enough to form Jacob Tremblay glad he wasn't trying to return up 16 years earlier. 2. Ringu, 1998. Before American teens were being literally scared to death in Seattle after watching a bedeviled videotape within the ring, a gaggle of individuals were being terrorized by the first tape demon, Sadako Yamamura, in Hideo Nakata's Ringu. The pale white ghost with the long, stringy hair, and one horrible eye peeking out from behind it, crawling out from inside a TV may be a defining moment in horror, and one that began an entire stateside craze of adapting whatever Japanese horror story studios could get their hands on. Finally, the threatening letter was brought into the fashionable age. 1. Candyman, 1992. It doesn't recover than Candyman for urban legend horror. Tony Todd stars because the titular villain during this combat the Bloody Mary myth, which was adapted from Fear Master Clive Barker's story, The Forbidden. The horrors happen during a public housing, and therefore the narrative deliberately sets the violence off by placing it against the backdrop of racial injustice. When a college student researching urban folklore starts perusing the projects to find out more about the infamous Candyman, she not only discovers him, but learns he wants to require her with him to the afterlife. It's a genre classic and an important entry within the black horror canon.